welcome to another episode of the Revel Flow Podcast. I'm your host, Flo. Today, we have another one of my good friends joining us. He was my boss at one point, my coworker in another time, and through all of that, him and his wife, Hannah, have been good friends of me and my husband, Elijah. This guy brings wisdom from life experience and can also help you get a six-pack. Please welcome my friend, Rich Main. No pressure.
No pressure. What's up, Lauren? Thanks for having me on here. I appreciate the confidence that I can get anyone in shape. So thank you.
I mean, you've got a track record. How long have you been coaching? 10 years?
I've been in fitness for 10, just shy of a decade.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty much a guarantee then, I think we could say.
no, yeah. Well, the interesting about fitness is it's a lot depends on the trainer, the coach, but it's not up to the coach for the person to get fit.
Yeah, that's fair. There's personal responsibility there for sure.
Yeah.
And I can say that also speaking as a coach. I haven't been a coach for a decade, but 6.5 years though, that I'm catching up. We're all about health and wellness and longevity, but
The best coaches in reputation understand what the desire is from whoever you're coaching. And being in group fitness now, I've done many different companies, but in our current company, 12 different locations, and every single one has its own personality. And not every individual falls into that personality of that studio, but there's a generalization. So like certain studios are usually more wanting that community. I come here just to be able to hang out and talk to people. And then you have another studio that's like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, just let me work out, give me a challenge. So the best coach is the one that can cater and kind of change their coaching style a little bit depending on where they're at.
yeah, I would agree with that. I only have coached in 3 different studios and they're all with the same owner, as you know, but they all 3, like you go to one, everybody is lifting heavy weights, everybody. You go to the other, everyone's cackling and laughing and dancing, which I'm all about. And then one kind of is just like a mix of both. And, and it also depends on like the time of who's there and stuff. But I think we fit into like a niche market of where we're currently coaching to. It's the nature of that beast, I think. And it kind of makes, so to kind of introduce what your roles are. So you've been a head coach, you've coached thousands of classes, thousands of people within that time. And also you are a groups director at church, which is such a parallel because group fitness, groups director. I know you've done personal training too. So you're not just like pigeonholed, but
Prior to this role, I was the general manager of 3 locations, which was a whole nother challenge in the boutique fitness realm.
yeah. But it all has like a common ground. A lot of people, a lot of personalities, a lot of plates to spin, a lot of expectations that you're managing of people. And so I think like there's so many things that are specific to each of those realms, but there's also so many things that are going to be relatable for anybody listening to. Like anytime you are managing of people in any sense, there's a lot that goes into it. Do you see parallels yourself from when you were like general manager, head coach to now what you're doing? I know different job, but similar concept.
Yeah. So to simplify at the very bottom of it is you're providing an experience. So between a small group and a class in Orange Theory, or just your experience at a studio, you're providing an experience. And now you are in charge of making sure that that experience reaches a certain expectation, certain level of excellence, to place certain characters and values, making sure that that is also duplicatable by others. So, and that's what's interesting. So I'm not necessarily, I may be directly overseeing the experience, but I'm not necessarily the one in charge of each individual experience. So you oversee people who deliver the experience. That commonality is something that didn't change. It just changed in the details, in the weeds of it, rather than the big picture and simplifying it. But the commonality is really just you oversee people that deliver an experience. You're trying to bring an environment as a leader that allows for people to feel empowered for innovation, growth, and not be controlled, while also simultaneously making sure that it's the same environment from person to person. It's a unique place to be. And this isn't the only field. I mean, anything that delivers an experience or a customer experience is going to experience the same thing.
And that's part of like where one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. I think what we're kind of walking towards in this conversation is that no matter where you're working, there are commonalities, right? And I think we are presented, like when we're in school or in career day, we're presented a career path that makes sense. You do an internship, then you move up to a junior partner, then you move up to whatever. But I feel everyone I've interviewed on this podcast, not that it's a career podcast, but it comes up. The career path is actually the exception and not the rule. Every single person has had a very non-traditional career path, but every single job that they've had within their career or life has been a stepping stone, regardless of what the title was. The skills that are built in every job, it really does become a staircase, like a stair step. I've learned nothing is wasted. If you are a bagger at a grocery store, you are building skills to eventually be a CEO. And I think your career path, I know you started as fitness, and that's just where you jumped into and enjoyed and are passionate about and are really good at. And when I got to know you, you had already kind of gone through major life change. Like you had just gotten married, you became a Christian like a couple years before that. And so I knew ministry, since I've known you, has always been on your heart as well. And what's cool about fitness is it's kind of like you're also a counselor at times, you know, really helping people through actual life change and physical change. So the things that you developed being one-on-one and even in group settings in fitness classes are directly involved now within what you're doing in ministry. And I know you're still on your path. Like, I don't know, maybe this is your end game, maybe not, but like, I know you love being and working in ministry and that's been your heart. So if you were to like look at your resume and you say, I want to work in ministry, but you start as a personal trainer, someone would say like, wait, that is not an actual career path. That doesn't make any sense. But in reality, it makes so much sense.
So that's not that you wouldn't look at it and be like, that's a logical stepping stone. You know, I started in fitness, but even prior to that, I've worked in retail. I've also worked for a distribution company in special events. So Angel Stadium, Honda Center, and all that in California at a very young age. And all of those experiences, you develop certain skill sets, which like, for example, problem solving, like being able to have a hard conversation, to be able to take feedback and not be offended and understand which feedback to take and do something with, and which feedback to take and just be like, that's interesting. We'll keep an eye on it, and understanding that our job isn't to make decisions based off feedback, but it's our job to receive feedback, analyze it, dissect it, and then potentially make a decision based off of it. Feedback doesn't lead to action. One thing that I've learned a lot, especially coming from fitness to where I am now, because as you know, as a coach, but in fitness, you get when you step out of personal training and now go into group and large numbers, you're just bound for more feedback, because one style and one music choice is not going to fit all. One experience here, how you respond to a certain scenario with a certain individual in ministry is not going to be the same of how you need to respond with someone else. Every problem solving and feedback and delivery is unique. And that's something that you just learn no matter what. And I think in any job experience, but a relation specifically from fitness as a stepping stone is realizing to ministry is like, in ministry, yes, I have a job to execute, but I'm not called by God to execute. I'm called by God to people.
Mm-hmm.
And fitness, a trainer's job is not to execute. A trainer's job is to person. It's the same thing. The best trainer are the people that care for the best, or that care for their people well. And it's harder to do in the masses, which is why training tends to be, I guess, at a cap when there's a correlation when it comes to personal relationship and size of a clientele base in training. It's just because someone only has so much capacity, but we're called to people, and training is the same way.
I'd agree.
There's certain things that you can control, certain things that you can't control, but you still track it, right? And that's where ambiguity comes in. Like you can track correlation, but you can't necessarily track direct involvement or direct correlation towards it. So you can track trends.
there's always going to be an element of kind of like the mystery, the unknown, the ambiguity that is important to also learn how to navigate that while also navigating things that are easily trackable, easily practical. Like I would say with the fitness element, you can physically see and physically feel progress, whether it's a number on the scale or a speed or a weight choice that you're picking out. Like you can see the results, but you don't see the conversational results, how the mentality is shifts throughout that coaching process. But those mentality shifts directly impact what weight they're choosing, what the results are. But I think it's important that you're building both skills. We went into business talk real quick, which is good. But I think, well, I feel like we should also kind of talk about like your story, because I think you have a good story. Everybody has a story, but I think it would be interesting to be walked through how you even got to where you are now. We talked a little bit about it, but even your mental shifts throughout that process. What did that look like? And where were the disruptor moments in your life that brought those changing moments?
So growing up, loved sports. Played 5 sports growing up. As I got older, got really serious about 2 of them. In high school is when we had some issues as a family at home. And that's where we had, I don't know the details and I'll never ask, but we had lost our house. We moved. I know at some point after that, my parents separated. And from that first move to the end of high school, I moved specifically 11 times, just between both parents moving multiple times during that separation. And there was, at that time, I was battling all the issues in my head from the trauma at home, depression, things like that. No one really knew about it as far as my friends, just because the things I went through at home, I didn't necessarily feel safe to express feelings. So I naturally didn't do that with friends either. So no one really knew about it. And got through sports, was pretty good at football, was supposed to play in college, got hurt. And that was a disruptor moment for at that time of my life. Because at that time, my identity was in sports, specifically football. So when I couldn't play, I felt like I had lost a part of me. I had lost purpose. So I was lost and hit a really dark place. And even track back to it at a certain point, there was a car accident when I was in high school that totaled my car. Guy ran a red light, smashed my car. My airbags didn't go off. My head hit the steering wheel. And the medic, the EMT, was like, "You should be in a stretcher right now." And I had nothing but a light concussion. At the time, grateful, but didn't necessarily think anything of it. I was a senior in high school. After graduating, going through that deep depression, attempting to take my own life, decided not to because of a voice I heard in my head about taking care of my younger sister, who's just shy of 2 years younger than me. We were super close. And part of that is just from kind of helping raise her and take care of her in that period of trauma when our parents separated. But that identity piece was a disruptor moment. So it kind of went on after that moment in that valley, and I came out of the valley. I started a point in my life of seeking. And that seeking was a combination of purpose. It was a combination of like, who am I? What do I do with my life? I couldn't go to college. I was supposed to have scholarships for college. But through FAFSA, I couldn't accept them because my parents hadn't done their taxes. And you can't collect scholarship money without tax transcripts. So at that point, I didn't have the money to pay bills, help pay for things at home, and also my own stuff, and then also pay for college. So I was working full time. Eventually got into entrepreneur area. I was kind of starting my own thing, and met some people in that invited me to church. And then that was kind of a disruptor moment because it changed it narrowed my seeking, because I was looking for friendships. I was looking for community. And as I met with these people, the way that I would hang out with them is they would invite me to church and then we go to dinner. So I started going to church, not necessarily because I desired to go to church, but I desired to be with the person. Started hanging out with these guys, and one of them ended up being best man at my wedding. That was a disruptor moment because it then changed the trajectory of my life completely. That's when I kind of got to know Christ. I reached this point. So in high school, it was like, okay, Rich, what are you going to do? Therefore, I was like relying on myself. I had now reached a point of, okay, Rich, God's going to help you do this. Therefore, it was still me. God was a sidekick. From there, reached a point I was part of the entrepreneurial thing. I was traveling to an event in Texas and do some bad decisions I had made, and also just not be able to afford bills and certain things. I was in a little bit of a pinch financially, and I knew that going to this event, I didn't have enough money to pay for my way back, or at least for my carry-on way back. So I only brought stuff I knew I was going to leave. And through this event, worked it. It was a 3-day conference that I was kind of helping organize, run, both on the event speaking side, but also on the production side. Through all of that, I made some connections, both with people that were attending the event and people in the hotel, that they actually gave me a free hotel suite for the remaining 2 nights because I was sleeping in the lobby the first night. And then the day when I was supposed to leave, I was supposed to get up at 3 to hit the bus to go to the airport. I woke up at like 5:20 with my alarm going off. My plane left at 5:30. There was no way I was making it. And I just sat there. I had a moment, and for some reason I was at peace. Don't know why. I ended up going, hanging out, got breakfast, went back upstairs. I ended up calling the airline and they switched it for me for free, which, if anyone's aware of airlines, that like just doesn't have, you don't get, like, that doesn't happen.
No,
And
it
at the
doesn't.
time, I was so emotionally drained that I just broke down crying, and that's when I kind of gave it to, that was like the final disruptor moment of life that was like, gotta give it to you. So I went from God being a sidekick to now like me finally surrendering to God. And from that moment on is when things changed drastically for me. Getting into fitness, developing me as myself, my friendships, ended up meeting Hannah, which you know that story that went from meeting to 3 months later engaged to 3.5 months later married to 3 months later moving to a different state. And God was there in all of that, like all of those connections, the fact that we were able to move a different state and have a job ready for us unplanned. It was just God was in those plans. And that was and I can look back and just like God had his hand over me in the car accident. He had his hand over me when I wanted to take my own life. He had his hand over me with all the trauma I went through with family. And now I can look back and say, and I still, as still have moments where you struggle surrendering to God, but it's when I surrender that I have more peace, I have more direction, more purpose, and things like that. And I didn't necessarily feel pulled to ministry until we actually moved out here. And something about it, I don't know what it was. That's what made me want to start that podcast that I started. Didn't finish it. It's still out there somewhere. There's like 12 episodes.
Coming back.
Consider it one season and done, but it's out there somewhere. And that's what made me want to start it. And I couldn't keep up with the rhythm that I had desired, so I stopped completely. It was more of a pride thing than anything for me stopping it. But yeah, so all of that led to now me as a man, a husband, a father. Looking back, I have experiences of like things I know I don't want in a family, things I do want to experience in a family. I'm grateful for both of my parents. They loved me the best way they know they knew how. As I grew older, and I have a lot more sympathy. They both experienced trauma in their own lives growing up. And so I have a lot more sympathy. There was a point where I had anger. I've kind of released that anger and developed better relationships now since then. But all of that has led to, I know who I want to be as a father, husband, as a man. And do I hit the mark every day? No, but at least I have an aiming point that I know I can work towards.
Yeah. The reason I brought up the disruptor is because I think those are defining moments. Obviously, that's how you explained it in your story. I think it's so easy to get on a track and just go through the motions. Everyone falls prey to that. I mean, even with the best intentions, it's so easy. So to have something that kind of shakes you out of it, and those moments happen to everybody, but I think there's a difference when you acknowledge that there's an outside source making some of this stuff happen in a way. Not that I don't think God caused your car accident. I think he's really good at not wasting anything. So sometimes when something good comes out of a bad situation, people will say, God gave me that bad situation. I don't think that. I think God's just such a good engineer that people will still bless, like honor and bless what happened. I think I think those disruptive moments, when we pay attention to them, some people can nosedive, but for people like you, it's a catalyst. It makes you go higher and it challenges you to where, like, look at you now, like you're in a healthy family, you're in a healthy community. Like, is it perfect? Of course not. You know, we're not supposed to be. I mean, like you said, as long as you have a vision and an aim, no matter how many times you stumble, you know where you're going, you know where your direction is. And so I think that's why it's so important. This thought came in my mind, which isn't a new thought. It's just you see what you look for. So if you are constantly looking for how hard it is to live in the world and how, I mean, there's a lot of bad. So I mean, it's not hard to find that stuff. But if you then make the decision like you did to choose, like, I have a helper, actually, I have someone who's like Lord over my life and who wants the best for me, you'll see that and you'll see more opportunity. You'll see more, like, exactly what you just explained. I just thought it's important to highlight stuff like that, just especially because you know how chaotic life is.
Yeah, Zig Ziglar, you can't hit a target you don't have.
Exactly. Yeah.
A career disrupting moment for me was after being in Ohio, right? There was a point where yes was your boss. And in that organization, there were things, I was a young leader. I got promoted at, was like 22. I was a young leader. I was ambitious. I had a lot of desires and things that I thought I could accomplish. And when I thought I was humble, I wasn't. So there were things that I did that caused me to put myself in a situation that allowed me to no longer work there. But it gave all of that gave me an opportunity to, when I stepped into another organization, the one I'm in now, for fitness, I took some time in just a regular position, analyzed the things that I had done, grew and worked on things. So when there was a point for me to step up in the leadership and organization I was a 10 times better leader to be able to say, you know what, I did mess up. Like, to take ownership. I wasn't a leader that could take ownership at that time. And now I'm a leader that can take ownership for bad hires. I'll take ownership for bad decisions. I'll take ownership for certain things. And if it wasn't for that disrupting moment of like having reality kind of hit me as a young leader, I probably wouldn't have sat back to analyze that. So
Yeah.
like you said, I don't think God allows things to happen, but he doesn't necessarily cause things to happen. When I say things, I mean like negative things, like that car accident. He allows certain things to happen, but it never goes to waste.
Exactly.
Because people have free will, we choose what we choose directly correlates to the result of how we feel.
Yeah. It's a
So
partnership for sure. Like, we, you know, obviously we're both Christians, so like we see it through this lens, but God put us on the earth to cultivate the earth, to multiply and to bring like more of the good, you know, multiply more of the good. And because we have free will, sometimes we make bad choices, but yeah, it's when God always provides the opportunity. He always gives the option. And sometimes it's like you had mentioned, sometimes it's through humbling yourself and having a reality check. And but now you're all the better for it. So I think it's the thought of, you know, growing and pruning. Sometimes God lets acceleration happen in our life and major growth, and then he comes back and he prunes so that it grows back even stronger and has more fruit coming from it. And I think that's why humility is so preached in such like a big key, regardless of religious belief. I think anybody, religious belief or not, would agree with that thought of like, if you can truly humble yourself by taking ownership for your shortcomings, you're only going to have that much more multiplication in your future. It's just like a natural law, but it's so hard. Like, kudos to you, because it is so hard to look in the mirror and be like, ooh, not my best. But you know what I mean? It's yeah, it's a one of the biggest keys, I think, for anybody who finds themselves in a moment of struggle, or you know, and this isn't for everybody, but for who's trying to find a way forward. It's like, okay, where can I take ownership? Where do I have control of the situation? Because you know, we both know you can't control people. We can control ourselves. So it's like, how do we navigate that going forward? But
yeah, thanks for allowing me to share that though.
thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I know you shared your story before, but it is such like a, it's real and it's tender, and it probably is tough going back and thinking about all that you walked through, but I know you've seen how it's positively affected people through sharing it. So now, where you're at now in ministry, kind of leading into that, we can talk about problem solving process, because with how people are peopling really hard these days. Lots of peopling all around. And I think with ministry specifically, people have a wild expectation with ministry leaders as far as putting them what I would say is like in the God place. Like they're holding ministry leaders the same level of accountability as God. So if you burned them, it's like God burned them, which is totally unfair. So I know you've been in this role probably for a year or so. So you've probably had at least 1,000 instances where that's happened. So I'm always curious to hear how people navigate being misunderstood, feeling a rejection, or navigating people's hearts who put you in that place that's not where you're trying to be. So how have you, and you don't have to give specific example because I, don't have to name names. How would you say that you've navigated those moments that feel a little bit unjustified?
Being in ministry, we are called to a higher standard, but that standard isn't perfection. And that's what's it's challenging, right? Because in fitness and in business and in that world, having a hard conversation was in a way easier because you're looking at it in a terms of, I mean, when I did it, I still cared about the person, but you're making a decision based upon the business. And you just try to deliver really well. You try to care for that person well in that hard conversation, depending on what the action is. The difference in ministry is conversations are it's not about the organization. It's actually about the person. So it's flipped. And what makes it challenging is sometimes you have to have hard conversations of correction or hard conversations of alignment. And first and foremost is to stay curious. Curiosity leads to questions. Questions lead to clarity. Clarity leads to ownership, and ownership leads to accountability. So when it comes to correction, if you can't get aligned, if you can't get clear and can't help the person take awareness and ownership of something, you can't hold them accountable to something. So it's very important to one, first and foremost, and I ask God to help me do this every single day, every single Sunday, because I'm someone I get so easily focused on execution just because that's the world I've been in. That's how my brain works. I'm very organizationally gifted. When execution and problem solving is like where my natural mindset goes to. I have to ask God constantly to help me view people the way he sees them in that moment. So when I go into conversations, if I'm not looking at that, if I'm looking at it through my lens, that is what can cause the most hurt, even if I have the best intentions. But when I ask God to help me see people through his lens in hard conversations, I have so much more sympathy. I understand better. It's easier to listen. It doesn't mean that I give on certain things or I give in to circumstances. I'm firm, but my delivery is just different. So first and foremost is caring for the heart of the person. And even doing that in those certain conversations, may not be grateful for you at that time. If the best we can do is the best we can do, sometimes, and sometimes you can't control how people receive things. You can only control how you deliver it.
Mhm.
So we do our best on delivery, and we do our best on to not be offended by whatever was said or whatever the action was. Because if you go into something offended, that's when things. So timing matters tremendously. But the biggest difference is going from in the secular world, you're kind of making a decision because a conversation because of the organization. In ministry, you're really having a conversation for that person. And yeah, it may affect an experience of the church, or like if it's a group, it may affect the experience of a small group, but ultimately it's their walk, it's their alignment that you're trying to have a conversation with. So
Yeah, with business, it's not personal, essentially. And then I do like the thought pattern or the thought process of like staying curious because that'll get you out of so many sticky situations. I think, like you had mentioned with business, it's something that's outside of both of you. You're whoever you're talking to, you're talking about something that is not what they identify with necessarily. Sometimes they might, but essentially you're talking about a third party. But like you had mentioned, when it's within ministry, people will project any hurt they have, and it could be hurt from 20 years ago, but because you're right there in the moment when they're triggered or in the moment where they're being faced with something, like as someone who works in the ministry, it's not your sole responsibility to do this, but in a way, depending on how you deliver it, you can help them untangle that pain that they walked through 20 years ago. It's a heavy responsibility. Again, it's not all on your shoulders, but I think you're right. I think there's absolutely a level of vulnerability too, because religion or God, God specifically, it is such a personal experience, and people are very vulnerable at church. Like I serve on the prayer team, and things people are openly telling me, which I'm grateful that and honored, honestly, that they would tell me anything at all that I can pray into for them. But you become so raw, so vulnerable. So when someone's already opened and then they feel a personal attack, even though it's not that, it is more of a battlefield in that way. But I love the process of curiosity. I don't remember all the steps. I'll listen back to this curiosity, and then it brings clarity, and then you can effectively communicate. I mean, this
Curiosity to questions, questions to clarity, clarity brings ownership, ownership brings accountability.
yeah, all of that. I think and that's another part of being humble, is like you've learned this already, and it's not a perfect practice. I'm sure you still get a little bit like, whoa, what are you coming at me like this for? But when you're able to really see past, like, they're not yelling at me, they're yelling at where they feel there's an injustice. And when you can humble yourself, then you can actually help them see the problem or the solution. And yeah.
I will say, when it comes to that, the difference, like not taking offense, after walking through my own trauma, and I've not fully walked through it completely. I still have things and I'm aware of it and still working through it, but I've walked through a lot of it. Because of that, my eyes are just open to like seeing others more in that way of like, where prior to walking through it, my initial reaction was defensiveness, where like now my reaction is like, what are you walking through? Because like no one is, no one's initial reaction is normally anger, or like that's not an initial normal response. So if that is their initial response, there is something triggering that for the most part. And we're not, by no means are we counselors. What we can do, and you do this on the prayer team, which is, and we do it in prayer as well, is affirming who God says they are to help kind of break them free of whatever mindsets that they have.
Mhm.
So reaffirming them of who God says they are, despite the conversation, despite the trial, despite the misalignment, despite the problem, it's still affirming who God says that you are to kind of help them stay grounded.
I would agree with that. You brought up, because you've walked through really hard things, it it gives you empathy, and it gives you the ability to see through the noise, because like you had mentioned, whatever they're expressing is a symptom of a root system. And so when you're talking to them, you're not trying to put a band-aid on it. Like if someone's angry, you're not just like, there are, you need to kind of escalate the situation, but you're not speaking to the anger in that person, you're speaking to the hurt. And you have eyes to see that now because of where you've walked through it. And thank God, like God was walking through that with you. And I mean, we're all, of course, in process. But I think that is kind of the gift and the challenge of being in ministry is now, like when God talks to us, he's not trying to shut us up or tell us to muffle our emotions. He sees the heart, and he can see like, oh my gosh, your heart was actually broken. You have a huge like rejection wound, and that's what you're feeling. And so with clarity and curiosity and being able to take accountability where you can then speak to the root. And again, it's not your responsibility to fix their root, but it's healing in that conversation for them too.
Well,
Um,
and that's how cool God works, right? So that's how our emotions work. but that's also how our physical bodies work as well. So, you know, this like as a trainer, you know, we're not doctors, but we're very aware. Like if you pull a muscle or if you do something, like if you feel pain somewhere, where you feel pain isn't the root. That's a symptom. Pain is a symptom. That's not the root problem. The root problem is somewhere else. Like if I have tension in my neck, there's so many potential root problems. Could be in my hip, my back. It could be misalignment in my hips or my spine. There's so many things that can lead to that pain. And so if you only address the pain, you're never addressing. So at that point, you're only addressing the symptom. You're never addressing the root. It's the same emotionally, same mentally. And it's just, I always find things like that so uniquely interesting of how God created things because there's so many similarities from like the spiritual, emotional, and physical experience that's the same but different.
I totally agree. The metaphors are people learn through story. That's where life lessons stick the best. And that's why story has been carried on for thousands of years down the family line. And I think that's why God talks about like gardening so much, because part of the metaphor and part of the story, like talking about a physical metaphor, it again takes it out of something personal and puts it into something tangible and visual. And so many of us are like visual learners. And so when you can talk about how there's a root system here, it is that kind of similar to how we started this conversation. Group fitness, and group director is so translatable. And the patterns, there's so much design, so many patterns in lessons. You can literally hear a lesson from God by looking at a paperclip. Like you can hear from God in literally everything. That's why I feel like there's so many hippies out there saying God is in everything, because they're right in that regard. Like he can speak through a donkey. The rocks will cry out, right? So I think yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. There's just a huge pattern and the answers are literally everywhere. And in your regard, your eyes were opened when you went through those disruptor moments, when you went through trauma. It took a veil off. So then you can recognize these patterns and have empathy for these people. And it benefited you because God healed you and is in the process of continuing to heal you first and foremost for your benefit. But then because you are healed, that's where you're multiplying, healing in other people because you're going to be doing the same for them. And it's not even something you necessarily have to be conscious of. This is such like a phrase, but hurt people, right? But healed people help heal people too. And so I think that's where the paradigm shifts. That's why there's disruptors. Like anybody listening, if you've had like a major disruptor in your life, pay attention. I think that's huge.
To make one more correlation with that concept is that's not just like a ministry, like healing people concept, right? Because we're talking from like a ministry to like someone attending or someone walking in their faith. But this also is the same organizationally. So if you have a department, and I'm not speaking in any specifics, just like take wherever you work, if you have a partnering department that maybe you think should be operating differently or more efficiently or things like that, or a certain person, you can take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Maybe that department or that person got more added onto their plate and like isn't really sharing it, but and is what's causing slowdown. So it just allows you to take a step back. So not only is it more like, yes, emotionally, spiritually, be able to talk to and work with that person, but also organizationally, coworkers, family members, all of it. Just to go through, you could be able to take a step back and look at what is the bigger picture. And yes, there may be things that may be directly affecting me, my efficiency, my emotions, or whatever, but let me take myself out of it, look at a bigger picture and view this situation with a different set of eyes. If I were to take it out of the spiritual aspect of it, just how can I look at this situation in a different perspective?
That's so true. Because whenever we're in it, then emotions play a role and all of these things kind of color the truth of the situation. And I love this one quote that kind of plays along with what you just said. It's that feelings are great servants, but terrible masters. So feelings can help inform, but they're not meant to make the decision. They're there to help bring the empathy and all of that. But like you said, taking yourself out of it, you're removing the emotions out of it and the potential to want to make sure you get yours at the expense of someone else. It's all about, okay, what is actually the true best solution? And you're right, like all of these principles completely can be applied to any field, day-to-day life, even like how you are with your family and how you are with your neighbor and community and your workplace. So I think they're, yeah, super important keys. And also, so we went deep. We talked about a lot of stuff. Is there anything personally, career, hobby, do you have anything right now that you are enjoying putting your energy into? No.
Yes, two things. At home, it's stressful, and you know this as a parent as well, but it's stressful figuring out a new season of life between like trying to maintain health, time with spouse, pouring into Frankie, pouring into myself. But at the same time, I just enjoy problem solving. So I'm enjoying navigating that. And it's a new season as Frankie develops. It's a new season every month because she's at an age where every month is different still. So it's just been fun to pour into her and be with her and in that regard. Career wise, specifically in the groups ministry within our church, we're at a place where we are completely creating and building 3 new teams and new infrastructure, new systems, new processes that like we did not have. Where my role, as much in the weeds I am a lot of the times, I do really, really love and spending my time in the clouds. So it's been really fun to dive into like being in the big picture of systems, processes, and organizationally, what is that going to do for our ministry and therefore affect the church? So that's just been really fun to pour into.
You get to dream and cast vision, and those are always fun moments too. So when are you gonna write your book? No
Uh,
problem.
I don't I don't know because I don't even
That's something that is that something you've actually thought of?
I have, but I've thought about, here's the thing, I've thought about writing a book, but by at no point do I have a topic for it. Like, I don't even know what, I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know. I don't like writing. I use AI.
Consider you use voice to text.
Um, no, I use AI I'm horrible at grammar. I use AI to correct everything.
And
So,
that's why you pay an editor for all that. You could
yeah, true, true.
consider this episode could be your outline for your book or a starting point.
There you go.
Yeah. So we'll look out for newest episodes from the Rich Main podcast and then coming to Barnes and Noble near you. 5 to 10 years. We'll give you 5 to 10 years.
Podcast was called Let's Reset.
Let's reset. I'll tag it too.
The purpose of that podcast was in a busy week when you can get lost, whether spiritually or mentally, to be able to have something to reground you in the middle of the week.
Ooh, that's good. I also think that's kind of like the theme of how we walked through the conversation is like where we would say disruptor moments are, those were actually grounding moments and like memory stones to come back to. But and kind of to wrap this all and put a nice bow on it, you've given out a lot of keys, a lot of wisdom of how to problem solve, how to navigate, and shared a lot with your story. Do you have, and it could be something we haven't even talked about, but do you have a final thought of a challenge or an encouragement you would like to leave for the listeners?
Yeah, when it comes to problem solving, I would encourage to two things. One, understand the timeline, and two, take your time. And if the timeline needs to be quick, it doesn't mean you need to make a rash decision. If the timeline is long, it doesn't mean you need to take the whole time. But not making rash decisions when problem solving, take the time to dissect it, plan, communicate the plan, and then execute and not just do something when it comes to problem solving. And ask for help. If I could add one more thing in there, it'd be ask for help. You don't have to problem solve alone. The best problem solvers don't problem solve alone.
I would say there's your book. I think if you were to create a workbook, a problem solving workbook, that thing would fly.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah. Well, Rich, thanks for all the wisdom and thanks for being a good buddy to me and Elijah and a good Uncle Rich to Lena.
Love Lena. If I could just affirm you for taking you've always been adventurous, but just for your consistency with this and you putting time into it and everything like that, it's just been cool to watch third party. So I just want to affirm you with that as well.
Thanks for saying that. It's been fun. I've thought about laying it down a few times, but I'm glad that I haven't. It gives me an excuse to schedule time with my friends, to be quite honest.
That's not a bad reason to keep doing it.
Not at all. Well, thank you for being on, and you have a great rest of your week.
You too.
See ya.